Colleagues, just for those who have been in other hubs, you are now in Vienna, you're in the City Hall, you're in the Festsaal, and actually the last 3 sessions will all come from here. So welcome. Welcome to the first session we're going to have here, which is to present to you 10 keys to effectively communicating human rights. And I have the pleasure of doing this together with Sarah Cook-O'Dowd. Sarah, if I may invite you. You may have seen preceding some of the sessions over the last 2 days, some clips where we presented what was called a key to effectively communicating human rights. But you haven't seen all 10 of them, and this is what this session is going to redress, that lacune. And actually, we will explain to you where this comes from, this whole project, and Sarah in particular will do this. But let's take firstly a look at the first 5 keys to effectively communicating human rights. Sarah, the last image we saw of the clip were a lot of logos. What is going on here?
Thanks, Friso. So basically, there are a number of organizations in Europe. I mean, all of us here really are working towards human rights and trying to communicate effectively on that. But especially since the last forum, partners got together. Those are the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, the Council of Europe, including the Commissioner for Human Rights, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, represented by the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, the European Commission at DG Justice level, the European Network of National Human Rights Institutions, ENRI, my organization, the European Network of Equality Bodies, and of course FRA. And I think FRA kind of, a couple of years ago when the forum took place last time, said, how can these organizations, which have such an important role to play in showing the way, leading the way on human rights communication, talking about equality in a way that makes sense, how can we work together to try to promote these, in partnership, let's say. And so over the past year and a half, 2 years actually, since COVID pretty much, we've been meeting regularly and trying to talk about how we can communicate and support each other's work. And in the past year particularly, we started to talk about let's revamp the 10 keys which were promoted or released in 2018. And the main reasons for the revamp was basically because there's been a lot of new learnings and theories and understanding around communicating effectively since 2018. We also tried to put the keys into practice and realized there's something maybe missing. We understand the how of doing it, but we maybe don't go into the why. What's the point of communicating on human rights? Who do we need to talk to? And I think the new keys that we have developed together go into those a little bit in more detail.
Sarah, let's take a look at the first 5 which we just presented. Is there any of those 5 which is particularly dear to your heart?
I love all of them.
Yeah.
We can't go anywhere without objectives. We need goals in order to communicate. We have to be able to speak to the right audiences and listen to what they're saying to be able to pick up what they need. Values is very dear to the work of Equinet in particular, and I should have probably chosen that one. But actually, I'm going to go with creating coalitions today, because I think the power of community, which we saw in one of the sessions earlier on, it's come up in every session that I've been involved in and listening into over the past 2 days. And I think that without these kind of strong partnerships, which are also an example that the 10 Keys are showing, we won't be able to do this work alone.
Yeah. Can you just also dwell on a little bit on this key 2, which is activate your audience? Where does it come from? Why do we stress that this is so important?
I think the importance of that one is really, we need to understand what the people want from us. And in order to do that, we really need to be able to listen to them and to connect with their needs. And I think that the FRA, especially in the lead up to this forum, have done quite a lot of good work in creating dialogues with citizens across Europe, really trying to bring in youth voices, bring in minority voices. And you did that, I understand, with an effort to try and understand what are people dealing with on the ground.
Yeah.
And the work of equality bodies, for example, which is what my work focuses on in particular, really is about being on the ground, listening to the cases of discrimination that people across Europe are dealing with every day, and then they're trying to say, okay, you have that as a problem, this is what we're going to try and find for you as a solution.
Yeah. Sarah, you're head of communication and membership at Equinet, the European network of equality bodies. You're sort of in contact with all those national equality bodies, which are, you could say, frontline communicators. They also will be in contact with civil society organizations, including grassroots organizations. Can they afford, how can they listen well? Can they afford all those expensive focus groups? Or how can they listen to the voices on the ground?
I don't think focus groups are very expensive in that sense, but I think that the main thing is that at national level, there is a lot of work being done by equality bodies, by civil society organizations in trying to bring their voices together to kind of create, let's say, a human rights narrative or a new human rights platform within the country. So we have many examples of that across Europe, actually. We've seen many members working with youth organizations, Roma organizations, disability organizations, LGBTI organizations, and really coming together and trying to understand what the issues of the individuals are that are represented by those organizations, let's say. So I think the fact that they're partnering together at national level and really trying to understand what are the needs is super important. And I think that national level is where that kind of information will come from. The European citizens don't necessarily have a voice very easily at European level. We try to bring that there. That's what this forum is about. But at national level, the equality bodies, the civil society organizations are the ones who are hearing what the people actually need.
Sarah, key number 5 is mobilize your messengers. I appreciate all the fancy alliterations, but what is meant here?
We need to speak with people who have experience in the different areas that we're talking about. I think a Roma activist has more power in speaking about their experience than you do. And so if you want to mobilize your messengers, you need to talk to the people who have a very powerful voice, because they've lived those experiences and can talk about it with authenticity, basically. So trying to mobilize your messengers is about trying to find the people with authentic voices, get them involved in the conversation. You don't give them the words to say; they say it with their own language. You're creating they have their own stories. We heard about them just now. Those stories are really important, and I think working with the messenger at the end of the day will be a lot powerful than the FRA or Equinet necessarily saying those things themselves.
Yeah. You're referring to a session which hopefully also quite a few of you following us online have followed, which was the role of football in supporting the promotion of a union of equality. And could we say that, for instance, the German top referee Bibiane Steinholz is such a messenger? Is she an authentic messenger indeed?
Yeah, I think she's amazing. I mean, the fact that there are women referees isn't very well known, and the fact that she experiences a kind of discrimination because matches aren't shown in certain countries because she's refereeing them seems to me shocking. People need to know about that in order for people to realize that there's an issue here and that we need to change that. So she speaks with authenticity, she has had the experience, and she's a real reference in the world of football as well. So I think her saying that comes from a place of real power. It's very empowering, and that's what we need to be able to do. We need to empower people who have had the experience themselves in order to be able to have them say what the problems are and how we can find solutions together.
Thank you. Let's take a look at keys 6 to 10. Sarah, can I ask you to do as efficiently as you did just now? Just run us through these 5 new keys. What are they about?
Harness Hope is all about positive messaging and sharing a hopeful message with others so that they can be inspired to find solutions, to know that they can act themselves to make change happen.
So we should show it the last panel as well.
Yeah.
Dare to create a vision of hope.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And we've done a lot of work on that area within this space as well. Fra has done a lot of work in that area, and I think Harness Hope is one of my favorites. Shaping your stories is like what we just mentioned. We want to hear the stories of real lives. You know, if I tell you the organization that I work for has received 500 cases on disability issues, you might really, that doesn't mean much to many people. But if I tell you, like we had another session today about a lady called Aina in Denmark who couldn't get on a bus to go to a festival, that's very frustrating. I like festivals and I'd appreciate being able to get on that bus. So by telling her story, the Danish Human Rights Commission was able, or the Institute for Human Rights in Denmark was able to say, look, this is a problem, let's all make sure that people get on buses and are accessible. So I think stories are super important for us to be able to actually motivate people and put faces on what we're talking about here. We need to use the right platforms as well. You know, if you want to be reaching out to young people, which is one of the big issues here in general, maybe we shouldn't be using Facebook so much anymore. Maybe we should be going to other areas. We also need to keep our language simple and inclusive. We need to make it accessible. So the fact that we don't use jargon is very important. The fact that we don't use the words that maybe some of the people in this room understand, but people outside, my mother and father, don't necessarily know what it means to work on some of these issues. So I have to really try and explain that in a way that everybody understands. And then finally, we really need to know when to talk about these issues. We can seize a moment if there's a big issue happening at that time. We can explain why this is a human rights or equality issue and try and hop on that. But we also want to try and find a time when there's maybe not too many other things going on, so people really have the time to listen to what we're talking about.
Really trying to link up to, let's say, hot discussions, societal debates.
Exactly.
For us, in order to achieve more impact. That's basically what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sarah, this entire project sounds very interesting, maybe even important. Are there any next steps which you could share with us?
So for now, what we've done is we've really managed to whittle down to what are the 10 keys, why are they important, and how do we put them into action. The next steps will be developing an e-learning tool in order to be able to share more about what that means and to be able to give you the tools to kind of put these into practice. So the idea would hopefully be that we would create video tutorials, and when I say we, I'm still talking about the larger partnership of organizations that I mentioned earlier. And we basically want to have something online that you can access and then understand what does it mean to put these 10 keys into practice.
Yeah, hopefully a living tool which we can each and every time when there are new important practices, insight, examples, that we could feed that in. I think we've been trying to learn from a number of, for instance, important political elections in the world, including the 2020 USA elections. but also to learn, including from the World Health Organization, how you can run an effective vaccination communication campaign. There, I understand we are encountering now something which is called social listening. Could you dwell on that a little bit, what is meant there with maybe ensuring that people are not felt that they top-down have to do things, but that they get more bottom-up support or interest?
I mean, I think the work that we're doing doesn't make much sense if it's all from the top down. We talked about activating our audiences earlier on. If we can listen to what the people need and respond to that with the right tools, then we're doing a good job. And I think if we do that through social listening, that's one of the tools that we can use. And thanks to these being online and a living tool, we can also develop them in a way that will be able to adapt to the future. Because at the moment, you know, it was a publication in written form before. Now what we can do is really adapt and innovate. We don't know what's coming in the next 5 years. Who would have thought of COVID 2 years ago, you know? So let's see where the future brings us and make sure that we can listen to what's going on in order to find the responses that we need to be able to make change happen.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you.
I'm going to stay here. Yep.